Whereas things are getting very heated in Washington, D.C., as a select group from Congress has been given access to the unredacted Epstein files, which reference our president far, far more than anyone could have imagined.
Well, he said that I spent time on Jeffrey Epstein's island. I didn't. I mean, he's a lightweight, this guy. He's a terrible, I think he's terrible. I thought he did a terrible job at the Grammys. I thought the whole Grammy.
Everyone assumed it would be business as usual, another predictable late-night opening packed with a few harmless punchlines, some easy laughs from the crowd, and maybe a light swipe at whatever headline was trending that day. Nothing too wild and nothing too risky, just the standard routine. But that is not what unfolded. The moment Jimmy Kimmel turned his focus squarely toward Donald Trump, the atmosphere shifted in a way nobody saw coming, and suddenly it felt less like a monologue and more like a live wire had been touched. Something cracked under the pressure, and it was not the sound equipment, it was the tension in the room that snapped into place.
Are a big deal, obviously, and a big story, a story that Donald Trump would prefer just goes away, but it won't just go away. It's salacious. It's the kind of story that makes headlines, and he knows that. So what he does is he bombards us with a dozen other crazy things to try to flood the...
Part of it is not watchable, but he was a lousy host. I'd say not as bad as Jimmy Kimmel, but pretty close. And no, he made a statement about me and Jeffrey Epstein. I have nothing to...
What began as a typical comedy bit gradually transformed into something much more intense, and you could almost feel the temperature rising as the jokes kept landing. This was not a calm exchange of ideas or a thoughtful breakdown of policy points. It felt more like watching a carefully timed implosion. From the outside, everything still looked polished and controlled, but underneath, the structure was being quietly shaken, brick by brick, until you realized the foundation itself was under strain.
You know, it's a term you hear a lot, but rarely when it is literally true. And most of all, it is so bananas that the guy who's in charge of releasing all these files and redacting all this evidence is Donald Trump's own personal defense attorney. You know, when Trump was convicted of 34 felony counts of fraud, Todd Blanche was his lawyer. Now Todd Blanche is the gatekeeper to the Epstein files.
Hold on a second. If you are enjoying this breakdown and want more deep dives like this, go ahead and tap that subscribe button so you do not miss what is coming next. Because trust me, we are only getting started. Now, let us jump back in. For years, Trump treated late-night hosts as little more than background chatter, mildly irritating perhaps, but not worth serious attention. He has traded barbs with comedians before and brushed off their jokes like dust on a tailored jacket. But this moment carried a different energy. Kimmel did not just toss out a few surface-level gags and move along. He examined the image, he nudged at the ego, he questioned the larger narrative that has surrounded Trump for years. And that shift in approach changed everything.
How is Trump responding to that? I'll tell you how. By attacking Canada again. He's at it again. This time, he's threatening to close down a new bridge they're almost finished with that connects Windsor to Detroit. He wrote, "As everyone knows, the country of Canada has treated the United States very unfairly for decades." I didn't know that, actually. They always seem pretty fair to me, but okay. Now, things are...
Trump did not exactly shrug this one off. Now, to be fair, late-night television runs on exaggeration and spectacle. That is part of the formula. But what made this clash so compelling was not just the humor, it was what the humor uncovered. The deeper Kimmel leaned into the absurd elements, the more Trump appeared to lean into visible frustration, and we all know frustration has a way of spreading fast. Outrage travels, it multiplies, and in today's media world, it acts like high-octane fuel.
So much we can take in, so to distract us, right now one of the things he's doing is suing everybody. Now, last night, I mentioned Trump is suing the IRS that he runs, for $10 billion, and that he's planning to negotiate a settlement to that suit with himself, which is just, if any other president, it would be the biggest story of their whole 4 years in office. For Trump, it doesn't even crack the top 5 this month. But so the New York Times published a story yesterday, claimed Trump has dropped his demand that Harvard, the university, pony up $200 million.
At the beginning, it felt like classic late-night teasing. Kimmel pointed to Trump's constant online posts, his habit of turning minor slights into major battles, and his remarkable ability to personalize nearly every headline. The jokes were sharp but measured. The audience responded with comfortable laughter. The cadence felt familiar, almost predictable, like everyone knew the rhythm and was happy to follow along.
To the Spanish-speaking world, to culture, Bad Bunny got a bad review from our bad president, unfortunately. He wrote, "The Super Bowl halftime show is absolutely terrible, one of the worst ever. It makes no sense, is an affront to the greatness of America, and doesn't represent our standards of success, creativity, or excellence. Nobody understands a word this guy is saying, and the dancing is disgusting, especially for young children that are watching from throughout the USA and around the world." This is a man who paid off a porn star.
Then the tone shifted. Instead of poking fun at the obvious theatrics, Kimmel started highlighting the repetition, the fixation on crowd sizes, the demand for loyalty, the recycling of the same themes packaged as brand new outrage. He framed it less as political analysis and more as an ongoing performance, almost like a reality series that never quite wraps up its season. That is where the mood tightened, because comedy hits hardest when it exposes something people recognize but rarely say out loud. Trump does not just answer narratives, he often redirects them. Criticism becomes a stage, humor becomes ammunition, and conflict becomes oxygen. But Kimmel took a different route. He did not match volume with volume. He treated the reactions themselves as the joke. He skipped the policy debate and avoided competing outrage. Instead, he mapped out the pattern and trusted the audience to see it. Ironically, that restraint may have been the most cutting move of all. The more Trump responded online with posts and rebuttals, the more it seemed to confirm the bit. It turned into a loop that practically wrote itself. Kimmel did not have to escalate because the escalation unfolded on its own.
Canada is building a massive bridge between Ontario and Michigan. President Barack Hussein Obama. Is that part of his apology for the Post the other day? Or stupidly gave them a waiver so they could get around the Buy American Act. Now the Canadian government expects me as president to permit them to just take advantage of America. On top of everything else, Prime Minister Carney wants to make a deal with China, which will eat Canada alive. The first thing China will do is terminate all ice hockey being played in Canada.
Here is where it gets interesting. Trump's public persona has long been built on toughness, dominance, the image of someone who does not flinch at criticism. Yet during this exchange, the optics felt different. Rather than appearing above the noise, he seemed drawn into it. Instead of towering over late-night comics, he looked entangled in their punchlines. And the internet caught on fast. Clips spread quickly, reactions poured in from every corner. Supporters rushed to defend him. Critics shared the jokes even more widely. What started as a monologue turned into a study of modern media strategy. Who truly shapes the narrative, the politician with the megaphone or the comedian with the nightly audience? Kimmel remained calm and composed, which is what made it sting. He did not raise his voice. Meanwhile, the backlash only intensified the spotlight. Ratings ticked upward. Online engagement spiked. Every heated response stretched the reach of the original segment. In attempting to silence it, Trump may have amplified it instead. At that point, the story stopped being about comedy and started becoming about tactics. Trump has long mastered headline dominance through bold provocation, but reacting to every jab can sometimes strengthen the caricature critics are painting, and that is exactly what seemed to play out.
All this other stuff going on. Busting into the election headquarters in Georgia, arresting journalists like Don Lemon, who is here with us tonight, suddenly shutting down the Kennedy Center for 2 years, calling for nationalized elections, Trump suing the government he runs for $10 billion. My head is spinning. I guess that's the point, but my God, remember when Trump was threatening to invade Greenland? That was not even 2
Rather than dismissing Kimmel as irrelevant, the responses elevated him. Instead of letting the moment fade, the outrage locked it firmly into the news cycle. It became a feedback loop. Kimmel jokes, Trump reacts, the reaction inspires more jokes. The audience watches the cycle unfold in real time. To be fair, political satire has always relied on exaggeration to simplify complex realities into digestible moments. It teases, it challenges, it entertains. Yet this clash revealed how tightly politics and entertainment are now woven together. The lines blur almost completely. When a monologue can ignite a national conversation and a former president fires back like a rival on a reality series, you are witnessing performance layered upon performance. What made this episode especially sharp was not just the content of the jokes, but the optics of the reaction. For someone who brands himself as unshakable, a strong public response to a late-night segment can look like a crack in the armor. True confidence rarely needs to shout. As the tone of the responses grew more heated, the perception shifted. In politics, perception can matter just as much as reality.
With his own face on a magazine, she spanked him. He's offended by the halftime. This is a guy who's okay with this being the release of the Epstein files. He's offended for the children. The MAGAverse was so hopping mad about Bad Bunny. It really is amazing how differently people can see the same thing. Half of us saw a heartwarming story of immigrants who had dreams to come to America, work hard, get married, grow up, raise families, sing, dance.
Viewers began asking larger questions. If a comedy segment can spark this level of escalation, what does that reveal about the current political climate and the fragility of public narratives? The exchange became symbolic of a bigger truth. In today's environment, attention is currency, and whoever captures attention gains momentum. Kimmel did not need to win a debate. He simply needed to create a moment. The reactions did the heavy lifting. Trump faced a difficult choice: ignore the segment and risk appearing unable to defend himself against mockery, or respond and risk amplifying it further. It was a no-win situation disguised as a social media scuffle, and that tension is what made it so captivating. Politicians who underestimate that dynamic do so at their own risk. Ultimately, the issue was not whether the jokes landed or whether the responses were justified. The deeper question was what this says about public discourse. When satire sparks strategy and outrage drives ratings, the border between governing and entertainment becomes nearly invisible.
For $200 million, now he wants $1 billion. Every post now is a ransom note from the president. And as far as Harvard goes, come on, guys, you know how this works. There's an easy way out of this. Just give him an imaginary degree of some kind. Give him an award for his magnificent brain and penis, and this all goes away. Give him, you want to know what to do? I'll tell you what to do. Give him the first annual Donald J. Trump Penis Brain Prize.
Trump did not physically erupt. There were no dramatic scenes or shattered podiums. But in the world of optics, impact is not about decibel level. It is about how the reaction is perceived. And this time, the perception carried weight. Once the initial dust settled, the conversation shifted from humor to control. Who really sets the pace in modern politics? The candidate with campaign rallies or the host behind a desk with a camera and impeccable timing? Kimmel did not chase controversy. The controversy circled back to him. In today's media ecosystem, silence can be powerful, but spectacle can be just as potent, and Trump has historically leaned into spectacle. Bold statements, fiery posts, immediate counterattacks. That approach has energized supporters and kept him central to the storm. But this situation felt different. Kimmel did not frame himself as an opponent. He positioned himself as an observer, commenting on behavior. That subtle distinction matters. Arguing feels like competition. Describing someone's reaction and letting the audience laugh feels like exposure.
All of this, I believe, every bit of this is an effort to distract us from the fact that Trump's name, according to one of the congressmen who just reviewed the unredacted files. Jamie Raskin says he did a search. He said Donald Trump's name appears more than 1 million times, which is a lot of. There's only 3 million pages in the whole. That's more than Harry Potter gets mentioned in all 7 Harry.
And exposure can sting. The more Trump pushed back, the more it reinforced the suggestion that the reactions were predictable. Outrage seemed routine, each perceived slight triggering a familiar cycle. It stopped being about one monologue and became about recognizing a pattern. People noticed how quickly things escalated, how fast posts appeared, how easily focus shifted from broader strategy to personal grievance. Regardless of political stance, the rhythm of that response cycle was clear. The episode expanded beyond late-night television into a broader cultural discussion. The more coverage it received, the clearer one truth became. Entertainment and politics are deeply intertwined. A joke can launch a news cycle, a reaction can dominate headlines. The separation between governing and performing grows thinner by the day. Trump understands this overlap perhaps better than most. His style has always included elements of showmanship, dramatic entrances, memorable slogans, high-energy rallies. He commands attention. But attention cuts both ways. When you own the spotlight, you also inherit every beam directed at you. And Kimmel understood that dynamic.
Donald Trump didn't watch the Kid Rock halftime show. He watched Bad Bunny. He wanted to make sure he hated him as much as he thought he would, and he did. Someone shot this video of Trump watching the game at his hotel in Palm Beach, and you can see that's the monitor. He's got a bunch of people there, and he's joined at his table by none other than, you'll see here, Senator Lindsey Graham. That is what I wish on Donald Trump. An eternity of watching football halftime shows with Lindsey Graham.
Instead of drilling into policy specifics, Kimmel zeroed in on behavior, the repetition, the intensity, the constant battle stance. It felt less like an ideological clash and more like a commentary on psychology. When satire feels authentic, audiences respond. Tensions rose as supporters labeled the monologue unfair or disrespectful, while critics argued that satire exists to challenge those in power. The debate widened. What role should comedy play in politics? Where is the boundary between critique and mockery? Does a strong reaction signal resilience, or does it strengthen the original joke? At this stage, the narrative shifted again. It was no longer simply Trump versus Kimmel. It became about how public figures handle pressure. Trump rarely ignores criticism. For supporters, that defiance represents strength and refusal to bow to media elites. Yet constant counterpunching carries a risk. When every jab is met with maximum force, the intensity can blur and start to appear reactive rather than strategic. In this case, that perception gained momentum. Kimmel remained composed in follow-up segments, calm and steady. The contrast amplified everything. One side looked amused, the other appeared irritated.
We're living in dog years now, and it's only going to get nuttier now that this new batch of Epstein files is out. The Distractomatic is cranked all the way up. The DOJ released 3 million pages on Friday, which sounds like a lot until you realize there is another 3 million pages that they haven't released and do not plan to ever release, even though they are required to release all of it by law. And it's important to remember the Justice Department is a completely independent agency from the White House when anyone other than Donald Trump is president. Trump put Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche in charge of the DOJ, which is kind of like the IRS hiring your mom and dad to do your tax return.
Yet one consistent truth stands out. In the clash between comedy and politics, perception often outweighs substance. Kimmel did not need to deliver a detailed policy argument or claim victory in a debate. He only needed to create a moment powerful enough to spark a response. Once that response arrived, the narrative unfolded almost automatically. Whether Trump lost control depends entirely on perspective. Some saw strength in pushing back, others saw vulnerability in escalation. What cannot be denied is that this exchange revealed how delicate the balance of media influence has become. For a brief stretch of intense headlines and trending hashtags, the dynamic felt flipped. The comedian holding the spotlight appeared to set the tempo, while the politician reacted to it. And in that moment, the punchline seemed to steer the stage, while the response became the story.
Also doubled down on his attacks against the New York Times. He's suing them for $15 billion. He wrote, "I look forward to watching their rapidly falling circulation force them to finally close their doors." Hey, listen, if you really want the Times to go out of business, maybe you should just run it for them, right? I mean, it's hard to keep track, but he wants $1 billion from Harvard, $10 billion from the IRS, $15 billion from the New York Times. And these numbers, where do they even come from? It's like when a little kid guesses how much something costs. $1 billion, million, trillion, hundred and...
As days passed, analysts even discussed media presence in polling conversations. Some argued that ignoring satire deprives it of oxygen, while others claimed that fighting back energizes loyal supporters. What was undeniable, however, was that the exchange kept Trump in headlines for reasons not entirely of his choosing. Instead of steering the narrative, he was responding to it. Meanwhile, Kimmel's viewership grew. Curiosity pulls people in. Conflict drives clicks. Even those who rarely watch late-night television tuned in to understand the uproar. Why did jokes sometimes provoke more intensity than direct political criticism? Part of the answer may be vulnerability. Humor slips past defenses. It condenses complex reputations into simple caricatures. It can make powerful figures appear human and, at times, fragile. As the cycle continued, observers wondered whether perpetual reactivity is sustainable in a media environment built to provoke. There is no easy conclusion. Trump's brand resists conventional analysis. Supporters see determination. Critics highlight missteps. Each reaction feeds a different storyline.